I sat at the dinner table, staring down at my untouched plate of food. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, so dense I could barely breathe. My parents were sitting across from me, their expressions unreadable, but I knew what was coming. I had heard this speech too many times before. "You need to be realistic," my father said, his voice firm but not unkind. "This passion of yours, it's a hobby, not a career." I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. I had spent years perfecting my craft, pouring my soul into every project, every performance, every moment. To them, it was nothing more than a fleeting interest, something that would never amount to anything substantial. "Dad, I love this. It's not just some silly dream. I've put in the hours, the effort. I know I can make it work." My mother sighed, shaking her head. "We're not saying you're not talented, honey. But talent isn't enough. You need stability, security. How do you expect to pay your bills? Buy a house? Support a family?" I felt a lump rise in my throat. I had anticipated their doubts, but hearing them aloud still stung. I wanted to scream that I wasn't being naive, that I had done my research, that there were countless people out there making a living doing exactly what I wanted to do. But I knew my parents. Their version of success was rigid: doctor, lawyer, engineer. Anything outside of that was seen as a gamble. "I don't need to be rich," I said softly. "I just want to do what makes me happy." My father scoffed. "Happiness doesn't pay the bills. You think passion alone will put food on the table? Wake up, kid. The real world doesn't work that way." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "So, what? You want me to just give up? Throw everything away because you don't believe in me?" My mother reached for my hand, her touch gentle. "We just want what's best for you. We don't want you struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, regretting your choices when it's too late to turn back." I pulled my hand away. "But it's my life. Shouldn't I get to decide what's best for me?" A heavy silence filled the room. My father sighed and pushed his chair back, standing up. "We've said what we needed to say. The choice is yours, but don't expect us to support something we know will only lead to disappointment." With that, he walked away, leaving my mother to watch me with sad, knowing eyes. I swallowed hard, feeling like a child again, small, powerless, unheard. But deep down, I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't let their fears dictate my future. I had to fight for what I loved, even if it meant fighting alone. I spent the next few days feeling trapped, my mind clouded with frustration. Every conversation with my parents turned into a battle. My mother would shake her head disapprovingly whenever I mentioned my dream, while my father simply refused to acknowledge it altogether. "You need to be realistic," my mother would say, stirring a pot of soup as if the conversation didn't weigh on her. "You think passion alone pays the bills? But it's not just passion, Mom," I argued. "I've done my research. People make a living from this. I can make a living from this." She let out a sigh and wiped her hands on a dish towel. "People who get lucky, people with connections. We are not those people." That was always their reasoning. They had struggled their whole lives to build stability, and now they were terrified that I was about to throw it all away on a dream they didn't believe in. My father was worse. He didn't argue, didn't yell. He just looked at me with a kind of silent disappointment that was so much worse than any lecture. "You think you know better than us?" he finally asked one evening. At dinner. "You think life is that easy?" "No, Dad, I don't think it's easy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just don't think I should give up before I even try." He shook his head, stabbing his fork into his plate. "Trying won't put food on the table." I clenched my fists under the table, my appetite gone. It felt like no matter what I said, they had already decided my dream was a failure before it even had a chance to succeed. Then, as if the universe wanted to test my resolve even further, my uncle visited. Uncle Peter had always been the family's success story, a businessman who had made a name for himself through sheer hard work and determination. My parents admired him, and they never hesitated to remind me of that. "Why don't you tell Peter about your plans?" my mom suggested over dinner that night, her tone almost taunting. "I'm sure he'd love to hear it." I hesitated. I knew exactly how this was going to go, but I had no choice. Uncle Peter leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So, what's this big dream of yours?" I took a deep breath and explained everything: why I loved it, how I had already started working towards it, the opportunities I had researched. I poured everything into my words, hoping that, for once, someone would actually listen. When I finished, he chuckled. Not in amusement, but in disbelief. "That's cute," he said. "But your parents are right. You should think about something more practical. Something that actually pays." My stomach sank. It can pay. People do this full-time. Sure, a few people do. But do you know how many try and fail? Why take that risk when you can choose something safe? Something guaranteed? Because I don't want to live my life being miserable just because it's safe. My father shook his head. Enough. I felt my hands tremble under the table. Why won't you guys support me? Why is it so hard for you to believe in me? Silence. Then my mother spoke softly, almost pityingly. Because we love you, and we don't want you to suffer. My father nodded. You're young. You don't see the reality of things yet. One day, you'll understand. Their words were meant to reassure me, but they only made the fire in my chest burn hotter. They didn't believe in me. They never would. And I wasn't sure which hurt more, the fact that they doubted me, or the fact that, deep down, a small part of me was starting to doubt myself, too. The tension between me and my family had reached its peak. Every conversation turned into an argument, every meal felt like a battleground, and every night I lay awake, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. They refused to see my passion as anything more than a childish dream, while I refused to give up on what made me feel alive. One evening, after another heated argument with my father, I found myself sitting alone in my room, staring at my laptop screen. I had spent months researching, looking for ways to turn my passion into a career, but my family's words echoed in my mind. You'll never make a living from this. It's not a real job. You're wasting your future. Doubt crept in. Were they right? Was I being naive? Was I throwing away a stable life for something that might never work out? Then, as if the universe wanted to give me a sign, an email notification popped up on my screen. It was from a professional in my field, someone I had admired for years. I had reached out to them weeks ago, asking for advice, but never expected a response. My hands shook as I clicked it open. Hey there, I just read your message, and I can tell you're really passionate about this. Let me tell you something, I was in your exact position once. My family thought I was crazy for chasing this dream, but I worked hard, stayed persistent, and now I'm doing what I love for a living. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. If you're serious about this, don't let anyone tell you it's impossible. Surround yourself with people who believe in you, keep improving your craft, and take every opportunity that comes your way. Keep going, you've got this. Best, their name. Tears welled up in my eyes as I read the words over and over again. This was the moment I had been waiting for, proof that it was possible, that I wasn't chasing an empty dream. Someone who had walked this path before me was telling me that I could do it too. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of determination. I needed to prove, not just to my family, but to myself, that I was capable of making this work. Instead of arguing, I started taking action. I built a portfolio, applied for internships, and connected with others who shared my passion. Slowly, I started to see small victories. A freelancer reached out to collaborate. A company responded to my application. People started noticing my work. Each step forward felt like a battle won against the doubts that had been holding me back for so long. Then came the real test, proving to my family that I could do this. I knew words wouldn't change their minds, but maybe actions could. It was time to show them, not just tell them, that my passion had real value. So, I made a decision. I was going to give it my all, not just for myself, but to prove to them that dreams aren't just for the lucky few. They're for those who refuse to give up. I stood outside my house, my heart racing as I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. This was it. I couldn't keep running away from this argument. I had spent too many nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I would ever be able to convince them that my passion wasn't just a childish dream. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the front door and stepped inside. The moment my parents saw me, I could sense the tension rising. My father's brows furrowed, and my mother's lips pressed into a thin line. They knew why I was here. Before they could speak, I took the lead. I want to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My father sighed, placing his newspaper down. We've already talked about this, he said. There's nothing more to discuss. There's everything to discuss, I shot back. Because this is my life. My future. And I refuse to let you dictate it. My mother shook her head. We're not dictating anything. We're protecting you. Do you think we want to see you struggle? Do you think we want you to live paycheck to paycheck, barely making ends meet? I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. But that's just it. You assume I'll fail before I've even started. You assume the worst instead of believing in me. Because we're being realistic, my father said, his tone firm. Dreams don't pay the bills. Passion doesn't put food on the table. Hard work in a stable job does. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I am willing to work hard. But I want to work hard for something that makes me happy. My mother reached out, her voice softer now. Honey, we just don't want you to regret this. I shook my head. The only thing I'll regret is not trying. Silence stretched between us. I could see the conflict in their eyes, but they weren't budging. Neither was I. Then, my father's voice dropped to a quieter, more serious tone. Do you even know what you're risking? Do you know how many people chase their dreams and end up with nothing? How many people wish they had chosen stability over passion? I nodded. Yes. But do you know how many people regret spending their whole lives doing something they hate just because they were too scared to take a chance? My father exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. So what's your plan then? Tell us. How exactly do you plan on making this work? I swallowed hard. I had anticipated this question. And I was ready. I've been working on building my portfolio, I said, my voice firm. I've been networking, talking to people who are already in the field. I've been applying for internships and freelance gigs to get experience. I'm not going into this blind. My mother's eyes softened, but my father remained unmoved. That's not enough, he said. You need a backup plan. Something solid. I hesitated, then nodded. I understand that. That's why I'm not throwing everything away. I'll work part-time, take jobs that help support me while I build my career. But I won't give up on this just because it's difficult. My father exhaled, shaking his head. You're stubborn. I smiled slightly. I learned from the best. That seemed to break some of the tension. My mother sighed, looking at my father. Maybe we should give them a chance, she said quietly. He rubbed his temples, then finally looked at me. This isn't going to be easy. You know that, right? I nodded. I know. He studied me for a moment, then let out a long breath. Then I hope you prove us wrong. Relief washed over me. This wasn't full approval, but it was enough. It was a start. And that was all I needed. As I sat in my small but cozy apartment, surrounded by my art supplies and the quiet hum of my laptop, I reflected on everything that had led me here. The arguments, the disappointment in my parents' eyes, the feeling of isolation, it had all been painful. But somehow, I had made it through. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. It wasn't easy getting here. After walking away from my family's expectations, I had to face the real world on my own. There were days when I doubted myself, when my bank account was dangerously low, and I questioned if I had made a huge mistake. Every time I thought about giving up, I reminded myself why I had started in the first place. I wasn't just chasing a dream, I was fighting for my own happiness, my own life. Slowly but surely, things started to change. I found freelance gigs, small commissions, and eventually, a steady job that allowed me to do what I loved. My artwork started gaining recognition, and before I knew it, I was making a living from my passion. It wasn't a luxurious lifestyle, but it was mine, and that was enough. Then, one day, I got a call from my mother. It had been months since we had last spoken, and hearing her voice brought a mix of emotions. She didn't start with an apology, but I could hear the hesitation, the longing, the regret in her tone. She asked how I was doing, and for the first time in years, I could honestly say, I'm happy. There was a long pause before she finally spoke again. We just wanted what was best for you. I sighed, feeling the weight of all the past arguments between us. I know, Mom, but sometimes, the best thing for me isn't what you think it is. I needed to do this. Another silence, but this time, it felt different. Softer. We miss you, she admitted. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I miss you too. From that conversation, things didn't magically go back to normal. There were still wounds that needed healing, trust that needed rebuilding. But it was a start. Over time, my parents began to see that I wasn't just chasing an unrealistic dream. I was creating a life for myself. A life that made me happy. Eventually, they came to one of my art exhibitions. They walked around, looking at my work, seeing the passion I had poured into every piece. My father, the man who had once scoffed at my dream, stood in front of one of my paintings for a long time. Then he turned to me and said, "You're really talented." That was all he said, but it was enough. My journey wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could do it. And now, as I stood in a gallery filled with my work, with my parents standing beside me, I knew that I had. Not everyone will understand your dreams. Not everyone will support your choices. But at the end of the day, you are the one who has to live with them. So choose the life that makes you happy. Choose the path that fulfills you. Because no matter how difficult it may be, the reward of living your truth is always worth it. And if you ever find yourself doubting, remember, you are not alone. Keep pushing forward. Keep believing. Because one day, you'll look back and realize, you made it. Have you ever had to choose between your passion and your family's expectations? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Let's talk about chasing dreams versus family expectations. If you've ever struggled to follow your dreams, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories like this. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Share this with anyone who needs the motivation to keep going.